Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 11th of August, and well, we got pretty much what we were expecting here. We got the push back up, the move more across, and that was that continuation of the orange between cyan and red. Interestingly enough, a huge trade-off of short interest after the really successful sell coming down. So there was the big pump of buyers, and then pretty much a sell-off for the rest of the day, and it just kept things pretty much modestly in that range. We had always been talking about the low setup right there, looking for this positive extreme at the 70 range to be revisited. We hit 73.50 now, and we've done this a couple of days now. So, from that standpoint, the positive extreme has been filled. We're seeing the bullish improvement within the extreme histogram, but that's got to correspond to also the shakeout turning around. And this particular case, the crossover of green, midterm buyers above long-term buyers here on the DOC, and the orange dipping. Now the orange hasn't dipped enough to get a crossover buy at this particular stage, and MBI White still leading, even if it is in a relatively weak setup here, but you're not getting any support from the magenta. So again, this gives you that possibility for push-ups, but at the end of the day, still downward pressure still existing. So all that's pretty consistent with what we've been seeing from both the price action as well as the move, and the volatility has been significant, which was also something we were looking to see happen within this. The NQ certainly much weaker, and it had much stronger MBI White lead on that for shorts taking control of it. But when we start to look at DOC in that, the long-term buyer activity just not there. And I think a lot of this is that interest in treasuries, simply because you don't have to worry about buying up at the top of the market, and you can still get a pretty decent return with where things were, inflation fading somewhat. That's obviously not going to be the case with what we've been seeing from oil, and particularly if it continues. So move back down here, TLT increasing the return rates, which we always mock this kind of setup when you get this move, and it's like, all right, you're you're getting a lower rate, and sure enough, it's just going to return back down. So I mean, this is one of those where timing does matter in some of these, and buying the rally on that is just locking in a lower rate, so they're already upside down in their long positions, but we can't help them with that. All we can do is point out what's going on. And you can see with oil still holding above that 80 level, and this just becomes an issue the longer it exists. So anything over that 75 range is problematic from a price structure standpoint. So this elevation certainly took away all the excitement that was building here when we had oil down sub 70. There was, that good potential that, inflation could be beat with that, and there would be a consistency. And now you start to see some of the labor pressures demanding significant increases in, monies and that, and that's your biggest inflation pusher, is usually labor and or energy costs. So as long as those exist, that's not going to stop inflation anywhere. Euro had a major spike only to fade, because the realization is, at the end of the day, why would you want to be in a euro when you can have a dollar and get a better return than you will from a euro? That hasn't changed. Not to mention the bank situation in the eurozone is at best life support, pretty much life support of the Fed. Gold, having reached its full bottom and still dipping below the red line on the extreme histogram, meaning there's just not a whole lot of excitement in the gold, at least in the paper market from that standpoint. But that's going to have to change with what we're seeing in the oil configuration and that. So that will definitely be problematic, at least for those shorting oil, gold, because it's going to have to bounce not too long. And nothing happening in the crypto space. Absolutely just dead in the water at this particular stage. You saw the Bitcoin with the weakness of MBI White, and even in the somewhat positive move from ETH, is not doing anything. So there's just not a whole lot of interest there, and a lot of that is the fear of regulatory action and just the uncertainty that's left, even with what some people thought was positive court rulings. It didn't do anything, and we talked about that when it happened. It just left more questions than it answered. And I think the idea was just to kind of force that bureaucratic hand to make some of those decisions so that they can adjudicate it once and for all. From a 50K standpoint, you can see we had the nice run up that quickly faded and then boom, collapsed, going all the way down through there. So that was just one of those inevitables, the up, the down, and fills all the way back into the space at this particular point, right in the middle zone of weakness. So NBI white popping up here, but the bull move that took things up starting to fade a little bit within that. And this is some of that downside pressure you're getting where every time there's new buyers come in, you've got someone who's willing to sell into them. And that can start to create a cascade effect. So what we're looking at from a intraday standpoint the other day, early morning, big pump. As soon as the market opened, everybody was selling into it. And that just moved us all the way back down to the bottom line, uh, creating new lows on the 100 0% Morganacci lines, and watching that 50% glide down usually becomes the bounce back point, and that held up pretty well. And then in post market, there was a little bit of a bounce, but nothing sustainable. And then as we're getting closer towards the actual pre-market open, you can see there's just every time there's a bounce into it, there's significant selling within that. And so if that pattern continues going into the start, it could be a really interesting Friday. So buckle up, be prepared, and continue to follow the readings, because so far it's been spot on with everything. As always, though, trade well. We'll talk again later. Look for me on the Skype chat.